everyone. Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What is happening, Rush Nation? We are back. We are live. We are live to a wonderful evening here in the UK. Wonderful afternoon, I hope, where you are, or if you're watching this at some other time and it's not live, then I hope it's nice where you are. Phenomenal returning guest, someone who I managed to catch up with in person just a few short weeks ago as he came all the way to London to watch the greatest rock and roll band of all time. It is, of course, the owner, editor-in-chief, customer service extraordinaire, rankings king, former multiple winner of the Fantasy Points ranking contest back in the day. And you can pretty much find him everywhere. All advice on Ross Tucker's channel and many other things is, of course, Mr. Fun Guy himself. Joe Dolan, welcome back.
Oh, Murf, how are you? It's good to see you. I very nearly put my Oasis bucket hat on for this. Yeah, it's like the problem was, and apparently this was a common issue as I peruse like Reddit and what have you, that the official Oasis bucket hat, which I purchased, is rather small. It's so if you have I mean, I don't have there used to be a guy in American baseball by the name of Kevin Mensch who was notorious for having just a gigantic head. My hat size is one that you find in a fitted hat on the shelves. But the Oasis bucket hat, which I had to have, I mean, I'm just there. It's like, you got to get it. It's a little bit of a tight fit. So I might have to rip a couple of seams out nonetheless. But I almost put it on just for you, but I decided I'd throw on the Philly Fanatic in honor of the first place Philadelphia Phillies, who are on quite a hot streak right now.
It seems to be that Philadelphia is becoming a bit of a title town at the moment with, of course, the Lombardi Trophy. And we celebrated when you came over here in style by going to a Philly bar here in London, which, funny enough, I thought of you and I was going to send this the other day and then I completely forgot, but I'm going to remember now. That they've gone into partnership with the Kelsey brothers. They did a massive promo ad for them this week on social media because they were over here enjoying it when Taylor Swift was doing her concerts here last year. So was
she at Wembley?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So there's a video of the two of them drinking pints in Passyunk Avenue, promoting the bar. So I mean, first of all, what was your experience of the Philly cheesesteak here in London? Was it as good as back home? I almost couldn't say it with a straight face.
A for effort. Let's put it that way. A for effort. I will give them. So what I guess they did was they made their own cheese whiz, which it just didn't have the fake saltiness of the American version, which is like kind of. Now I'll tell you this, Murf. If you're making a Philly cheesesteak, there's one cheese that works really well. Cheese whiz I'll do, if you go to like one of the touristy spots like Pat's and Gino's and what have you. The cheese that is best for a Philly cheesesteak is called Cooper Sharp. It's a American style cheese that basically it melts. That's what it's designed to do. But it has like the sharpness of a provolone. So it's a very good cheese for a cheesesteak. The second best cheese is just sharp provolone. It just doesn't melt as well as a Cooper Sharp. And then you would go down to like American and Cheese Whiz and what have you. So that's what Passyunk Avenue did, is I believe they made their own Cheese Whiz. A for effort. I just don't know if they've gotten it down 100%, but the ambiance of the place was phenomenal. Just Philly sports everywhere. So I loved it, and it was in a really cool location, like underneath a bridge. Like I guess there's multiple locations, but the one we went to was underneath the bridge, and that was a really awesome location.
Yeah, it is a cool place. It was cool to spend time with you and your lovely wife, and to hang out and to catch you while you were seeing Oasis. It was like an opportunity too good not to do. Before we move on, anyone that's listening to you on here before, we do have lots of new subscribers to the channel. So first of all, thank you very much for hitting us up and hitting that subscribe button. Give us a like as well if you're here. If it's the first time, welcome. Always seem to get new listeners all the time. So really appreciate you joining in. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. You'll get many great shows as we're gearing up to fantasy football season. But those that have been loyal for years know that you're a Newcastle United fan. Before we get into the talk of winning titles for fantasy football, I have to get your thoughts on Alexander Isak and the difficult time that is occurring. And I say this with a joy in my heart that Arsenal pull off a significant transfer period. This isn't a soccer podcast, but it's a good day for me. And then unfortunately, still the day. I personally think he stays, but I'm keen your thoughts while you're here.
Well, I mean, I think they want him to stay and they need him to stay because they can't score a goal. They played what a third of the match against Villa with up a man, and they just could not finish. And that's going to be their problem if they can't. Believe me, my knowledge of football, soccer is bottom rung. You know way more about our football than I know about yours. So I picked a working class drinkers town like Philadelphia to support. And it turns out that since I've chosen to support Newcastle, they've been up, they've been down. This is now their second in the last 3 years in the Champions League. But they're not going to go very far in the Champions League if they can't score a damn goal. So we'll see what happens with these. I don't follow it as closely as I do the NFL. I will welcome him back with open arms, but he seems to be pissing off a lot of people right now.
Yeah, he's really digging in, and that we've got 10 days left. We'll see what happens. I personally think he stays. I think if there's any football club in the world that can just hold on to an asset like that and not give in to the player power, it's Newcastle, because they're worth like $500 billion or whatever it is that they're worth. So ultimately they can do that. But while we've lost some listeners who have given up because they don't like the round ball, and that's why they follow NFL, we will pivot across. Let's talk about today. We're going to cover off. We've done a few shows like this in the offseason where we've looked at ADP, but we're at this point now where the more casual fans are joining in. They're picking up, they're doing mock drafts. They're using mock draft machines. They're starting to pick up their fantasy noise. If you are one of those people, welcome to draft season. Some of us have been doing this for like 6 months, like Joe has, and again, not far off me as well. So it's always good to welcome everybody as they're coming in the draft season. But we're going to give you the draft plan. Effectively, we're going to look at players that we really like and our favorite players at ADP. Our least favorite players at ADP. Now, the ADP is changing all the time. So my first advice is what you're hearing now, if you're listening to this a few days on and the ADP is not the same, it does move every few days now because of the fact we've got more drafts going on. Players that we're expecting to outperform ADP, some under the radar players, and then ones that we're just not going to touch, ones that we just think no matter where they are, probably going to avoid them. I would never have anyone that I would say I would never draft. There's always a scenario where it could happen, but more than likely or not, we're going to use Fantasy Pros have their ADP, which they up to date with 6 sources, but we know that most people play on Sleeper this time of year, so we're going to keep this to Sleeper's ADP and dig into this. I guess really before we get into this, Joe, I want to get your feeling on what you've seen in the preseason, what we're seeing in sort of, we've seen some wonky trades in the last 24, 48 hours. Like at this point in the season, we're coming into the last week of preseason. What are your general feelings and thoughts about the season so close to the horizon and sort of some of the news that's come out and where you're kind of at this stage of the season?
Now, forgive me because this can always be a jinx, but I believe we are now about to have a second consecutive preseason training camp without a leagues altering fantasy football injury. Now, of course, last year we didn't know Christian McCaffrey had a leagues-altering fantasy football injury. The 49ers just didn't tell us that. But this year, it seems like, of course, some guys have gotten banged up, and you have to note that, Josh Downs, Jaden Reed. I'm sure there are other names I'm missing. Matthew Stafford, who now is back and practicing, and now he's talking to the media, so everything's A-okay there. But fortunately, that's all. Murf, I got to be honest, that is all I hope for every August. maybe sometimes my priors will be confirmed with a rookie looking good, or one of my favorites will look bad, and then I try to ignore it, and then there's always that stuff going on. But ultimately, I don't care if it's the most boring August of all time, so long as people don't get hurt. We haven't really had that yet. Somebody that, I think even last year, JJ McCarthy by this time was ruled out for the season, which was not necessarily fantasy football altering, but certainly was altering the way we thought about what was going to happen with the Minnesota Vikings. But this year, it's been, for the most part, pretty quiet. Now, could we have some trades? Brian Robinson is in the news. The Devon Vele trade happened. That was he actually was one of my favorite players to draft at cost. I pulled back from that, and then now he goes to the Saints. But that's not a massive trade, right? That's not something that's going to alter the league. So I'm excited right now that it looks like we're going to go in and at the very least our cheat sheets haven't had to be significantly altered.
No, I feel for Jalen McMillan. That's probably the worst one we've seen in preseason.
Yes,
he is going to miss half the season. At least with that injury, which again doesn't really alter fantasy football. I don't think there are many people in on him because everyone has swung to Emeka Egbuka, and that way actually people are now pushing Emeka Egbuka upwards more because that pathway to early volume is even greater now, because effectively he will start the season as a wide receiver too, because Chris Godwin will miss the first 3 weeks of the season.
And I actually wrote him down on our show sheet as a player who's going to outperform ADP, but I needed to throw into the ether that his ADP isn't really his ADP right now, right? No. It's from what was going earlier when I'll admit Egbuka is a player I missed my window on, like in terms of, because I think we very much were treating him as a Jackson Smith-Njigba rookie with the Seahawks, where Smith-Njigba caught 60 passes, but he was not a fantasy football asset because they still had Lockett and Metcalf and were slowly bringing him along. They don't have that luxury, the Buccaneers, with Emeka Egbuka. And quite frankly, though, I don't think Emeka Egbuka was going to let them do it anyway, based on what I've been hearing about him in training camp. So
he's been lights out. He's been so good.
I feel terrible for Jalen McMillan, but where are the targets going to be when he comes back if Egbuka continues this and Chris Godwin returns in October as expected?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. From the moment that Emeka Egbuka was drafted, I messaged our Patreons and I said, cash out on Jalen McMillan. If anyone can take him for anything right now, he is done. Like, he's done at the Buccaneers, because the pathway to him there is not there. You don't take a first round wide receiver when you are as stacked at wide receiver as the Buccaneers, unless you think this guy is, let's be honest, a potential all-star. Like, I'm not saying he's going to get there, but they've drafted him thinking that he is the Mike Evans replacement, but he's going to play with Mike Evans for 3 or 4 years now. There was a trade yesterday that did catch my eye. It's a player that had a lot of fantasy hype in preseason a few years ago and has never delivered, and that's Sky Moore. And Sky Moore goes on to an extremely weak wide receiver core at the San Francisco 49ers, weak at this current point in time. DeMarcus Robinson banned, Brandon Ayuk on pup, going to miss 6 games. Ricky Pearsall in his second year with an interrupted rookie year being shot. You got Jawan Jennings, who has never played an entire full season as a starter in the NFL. What are your thoughts on Sky Moore? Is there some value in picking him up off waiver wires if your league's drafted, or do you think this is just one of those trades that, like, it sounds cool, but actually just
do you just
nothing? Not
have Sky Moore syndrome, Murf, where you just recoil at seeing the name?
No, because I was out the first time, so I almost feel like I need to jump in on this.
Just wave. Like our guy, of course, we all love John Hansen, but boy, has his Twitter feed been blowing up today. Once anybody here, the one thing you don't want, and John's been a relatively good sport about it, but the one thing you don't want is when a professional athlete in this industry we're in kind of, I don't want to say fails, but let's use that term for lack of a better one at this time. You don't want to be associated with that guy. The first thing people think of when they think of Sky Moore is John Hansen. No, I mean, look, he might be a guy who needed a change of scenery. You want anybody like Seth Kaiser, who covers the Chiefs, who does a great newsletter for the Chiefs, and he's covered them for years. He's been on my show, and he said, I just cannot believe it didn't work out. Like in terms of like the player that he was on tape at I believe he went to Central Michigan, the player that he was on tape at one of the whatever directional Michigan he went to, that he can't believe it didn't translate to Kansas City. And it just seems like Sky Moore, from the moment he entered the league, was somebody who needed a shot of confidence. Like, I think I remember his first offseason, he had never returned punts before, but his first offseason, they had him returning punts, and he was muffing punts and muffing kicks. And that was before he even started getting snaps on offense. And I think that might have just shot his confidence. Maybe he's a change of scenery guy. Murf, I'll have to see it first, quite frankly. That this is not, like, for instance, like, I think John Mechie was probably a trade that the 49ers, as a matter of fact, I think there was a report that the 49ers pursued the John Mechie trade. John Mechie, to me, is a better football player than Sky Moore, and I don't expect John Mechie to do much of anything for fantasy after getting traded to Philadelphia.
No, I always feel like this is like one of those reboots, like TV reboots, and with a secondary cast, and you just think, oh man, I missed it the first time round. Do I want to buy in? And I always think like he's so stupidly free that if you've got guys on IR, like a Darren Waller, like a Godwin, although Godwin's going to come off because he's going to be taken off the pup, but an Ayuk, and you got a spare spot somewhere, and you just think, I'm not anti-adding him and just seeing, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to transpire into anything, but stranger things have happened. Maybe John Hanson was right all along. He's right a lot of the time. He just missed.
That was Sky Moore's an all-timer for John. That's an all, and he'll throw you back. Murph, you might have been living stateside the last time he had one of those, and there was a gentleman by the name of Kevin Jones.
Oh wow,
from Virginia Tech, who burned John in a big way in like 2005, I believe. I think it was 2005. He burned John, but that's one people remember quite a bit.
I think it was 2004, actually.
Oh,
he was a late first round pick.
Well, I think it was his second year where
second year.
Oh no, and it wasn't for the Bears, it was for the Lions at the time.
It was for the Lions. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I think his second year, John was like all in on Kevin Jones, and then it just did not happen. And it was coming off a great rookie season too. So it wasn't even apples to oranges. It was like Sky Moore was a guy who just came in and was never anything. Kevin Jones had a great rookie season and really then just completely collapsed. Yeah.
He had like no touchdowns, but I think if I remember rightly, he broke 1,000 yards.
Yeah, and just never reached that number again. His touchdowns went up, though. His touchdowns went up, but no, yeah.
So maybe that's what he was going for. Yeah, shout out John Hanson. I enjoyed my Kings Classic draft with him. The two that we did together was a lot of fun. Let's get into the draft plan. Before I mention that, list of leagues still going. There's about 30 spots left. There's a link below, you can enter them. So yeah, they're filling up fast. We've got all sorts of exciting formats, the ones that people haven't heard of, the Rules Mania league, where each person gets to come up with a unique scoring or unique rule within reason. I get the power of veto because some rules are just too complicated to enforce, and I'm not RoboCop. And our Flex Frenzy, where there's two drafts, you draft a team and then you pick players from that team. A lot of strategy involved, but there are the more traditional standard auction, all those sorts of things. So sign up below, donations to charity, join in. Great to be having you in those leagues. They will fill up in the course of the coming days. Let's talk about our favorite players by position at ADP. I'll let you go first at the quarterback position because you've got someone who is a lot of people's favorites. And I'm really surprised that he's had a lot of positive talk. Forget the beat writers talk, because beat writers talk hasn't been phenomenal. But in terms of the fantasy community, he has a lot of talk. But his ADP has barely moved. It's gone up a little bit, but not ridiculous.
Yeah, it's Drake May, and look, his ADP is QB 16. So this is why drafting like a quarterback like Drake May is so advantageous because he has upside. And his downside is, oh, well, I drop him or I put him on my bench and I pick up somebody boring off the waiver wire to hold down the 10 to 15 points that I need at the quarterback position. Murph, I'm a big wait on quarterback guy this year. I think it's the proper strategy, especially because there are some teardrops at like running back and receiver. I'd prefer drafting a George Kittle this year than where some of the elite quarterbacks are going. That's just me. But Drake May was a phenomenal scrambler last year, just phenomenal. But here's the one thing. He had basically 0 designed runs in that offense last year. And I have it on good authority that designed runs are going to be part of what Drake May does this year. I think he offers outsized rushing upside with a little bit more juice in the passing game. You know, maybe the Demario Douglas, Pop Douglas, he continues to progress. Kyle Williams, the rookie receiver, he's come in and done some things. They obviously have Stephon Diggs. He's got a great connection with Hunter Henry. It's not a great receiving core by any stretch, but you also have an explosive player out of the backfield in Travion Henderson. And then ultimately, I think Drake May is going to run way more than he did last year. At ADP, I'll take him on every team. You could pair him with JJ McCarthy and just go all unknown upside. You could pair him with Trevor Lawrence and say, is this finally the year for Trevor Lawrence? But Murph, you saw what Liam Cohen did for Baker Mayfield last year. You can pair him with Dak Prescott. You probably have to draft Dak Prescott first, but you can go 2 ends of the spectrum. Dak Prescott, pure pocket passer. You know what you're getting from him if he's healthy. Drake May, you don't really know what you're getting, but he might end up being your starter. He's my favorite quarterback for just every kind of build this year.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. And I think that's it. It's definitely one that you'd look at and go, that makes sense. And I've been picking up a lot of him as well, especially in Superflex, because his price hasn't moved accordingly to the upside that you get. So in a Superflex league, he's absolutely perfect as your QB2. But some people take him as weight at QB1, and I tell you the Superflex combo I love a lot is the Knicks May combo that you can get with all that upside and everything you can get with that. I just think that's a really elite combo to get. And you can get them at a pretty good price too. So I'm in on May. I think May is a great shout. The fact that you can get him late, you can build a superb team. There's 2 concerns for me on May. I'm not overly worried concerned, but they're just things that I kind of just I'm a little weary of. Not enough to bake the risk because I think there's plenty of upside. The first one is I don't love that receiver core. I think there's some sneaky players in there. I think one of them we'll talk about in Kyle Williams could emerge from the pack. By all accounts, Stephon Diggs is being a bit of a brat. We know that that's been true in other places in his career.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, exactly that. It doesn't feel like a big shock or leak to anyone. Is he going to get on with McDaniels? Probably not. It's a very strange... If you go back to the Patriot way, Stephon Diggs is almost like the complete opposite of the epitome of a Patriot guy. When they brought more Patriot guys back into the room, it just felt like that's a bit of a strange connection that is the way they're going to go. So I'm a little concerned that they if that happens and the fallout occurs, that's going to really hinder Drake May. And then the second part is the McDaniels offense is very complicated. It does take time to master. And I think, whatever he achieves this year, regardless of where he gets to, I'm sure for a fact he's set up for success next year.
Yeah. And that's why I think he's a great dynasty buy now.
100%.
I actually traded him in dynasty. I drafted him in a startup dynasty, but it was a 1 quarterback league dynasty. And I traded him for JJ McCarthy in a 1st round pick that somebody offered me. And I'm like, look, it's a 1 quarterback league dynasty. If somebody's going to offer me a 1st round pick in a trade for a quarterback, I'm going to make the deal. But I love JJ McCarthy in long-term formats. Drake May. I still like JJ McCarthy too, but I like Drake May more because we've actually seen him. But no, I mean, I think he's a good redraft pick. I'm not guaranteeing that he's going to succeed this year, but I just like his price with his skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. My pick is a bit of a homer pick, but I just think that the value that you get on him is is sheerly ridiculous. And it's QB7 Baker Mayfield. He's going at 67 overall, which is just putting him in the 6th round, which is cheap for a player who finished 3rd last year, 4,500 yards. And I think people are sitting there going, well, Liam Cohen's left the building. They've got a rookie OC and all of that. And I listen, and I get all of that to a degree. The things about Baker Mayfield is, one, there's complete continuity on that offense, right? Other than Emeka Ibuka, you've added a weapon. Pretty much that team is intact on the offensive side of the ball. Small changes on the offensive line, nothing that's going to concern too much. Losing Murf for a few games at the start of the season is a bit of a challenge, but I don't think it's one that Baker's going to, be that harmed by. The schedule for the Buccaneers this season is honestly, I see people tipping other teams to win the NFC South. And I'm like, you haven't looked at the Buccaneers schedule, because the Buccaneers schedule is ridiculously easy. Like, they do have some playoff teams they've got to play from last year. They got the Texans in week 2. They weren't particularly a great playoff team last year. They did win their wild card game against the Chargers, but that wasn't a big shock, and then lost to the Chiefs. So that's a tricky game. The Eagles, but they seem to always have the Eagles number. You will know that better than anyone.
If the Eagles went to Tampa Bay and played the 76 Bucks, and I'm talking the 76 Bucks as they are now, at like 75 years old, they would lose that game in Tampa Bay. It's just one of those. Murph, every NFL team has that one house of horrors. And that's the Eagles' house of horrors.
It really is, and they've made them look ordinary in the last few years. So, the Lions, they're a completely different outfit to what they were 12 months ago. The Bills is the one on the schedule you look at and go, yeah, that's quite rough. They're probably really underdogs in that game. Then the Rams, not really the same team they were 12. Well, sort of are, but again, are you really scared of the Rams? I'm not overly. Famous last words. That's kind of it. The teams, and then they've got, they've got to play the Saints twice, the Panthers twice. The Dolphins are on the schedule. There's some, the Jets are on the schedule. There's not a lot to be scared about on this schedule. There's not a lot of great defenses from last year he's having to play. I just think I don't understand where we're ranking Evans reasonably high. We think Ibuka is going to shoot out the cannon. Bucky Irving is one of the best things since sliced bread. And yet we're saying Baker Mayfield is going to be significantly worse than last year. It just, none of that adds up as an argument for me. So I think, where he's going in drafts, I think he's easily a top 5 QB. I think, if you're getting him in the 6th round after you've got your sort of staple of running back, wide receiver core, I love that over getting the guys. I don't think he's going to be too far away from the Jacksons, Daniels, and Hurts and Allens of this world. So I think he represents significant value, and I've been getting him later, 7th, 8th round in drafts. I've been getting him, and I just think that's an auto push in that range.
The only concern I have is, like, you look at the 41 touchdowns, and Murph. I know I don't want to rain on your parade here, but if any quarterback throws 41 touchdowns, I'm taking the under the next year. Like, that's a huge number. That it's not a guarantee, but that's a big number. And I also am just a little bit leery that he could be this year's CJ Stroud, the guy who everybody, the quote unquote pocket passer. And that's the other caveat I will say. He ran better last year than he ever has before. That's not really something you see a guy pick up in like his 7th year in the league. No. But he did that, which was interesting. Does he go back to not doing that? Those are the concerns I have with Baker. He's been somebody I've stacked with Evans a lot in best ball thus far. Don't have him much else in redraft, but in best ball, well, frankly, best ball is really mostly all the drafts I've done so far. but in best ball, I've dabbled in Baker where in leagues where I have Mike Evans.
Yeah, I think they're valid points. I don't think the rushing will probably be quite as high as last year because of Liam Cohen. Although there's going to be a lot of continuity on the offense, I think that will drop a bit. 41 touchdowns. Okay, let's say it drops by 3-4. So it's 10%, right? He also threw 16 picks. I don't think he's throwing 16 picks this year. So all of a sudden you offset that to 12. Because the schedule's easier, he won't have to. I think the TDs will come down because he won't need to play as much, but I think the yardage will go up. I do think that they'll throw the ball more. I think there's going to be plenty of value for him. So I think with the reduction in INTs, because he's not going to play hero ball as much, with the increase of the yards, I think they kind of offset. And I think I look at his fantasy points total from last season and think there's a pathway to him getting up there again, there or thereabouts. And also, he didn't throw the ball that many times last year, 570. There's a chance it goes higher with more safe passes and more higher completions. So I don't know. I think there's room to. I get your point on the TDs. I agree, but I think he could easily offset that in other ways and stay where he is. Let's plow through the running backs because we're in a very similar range. You've gone Kenneth Walker and I've gone Alvin Kamara, which is going to shock absolutely no one on this channel.
Yeah, so Ken Walker, I am concerned about the foot, yes, but nonetheless, the one thing I do know is that this offense is just tailor-made for him. It is an outside zone offense. It is outside zone gives the running back time to find the right hole. B, it really relies on the running back's creativity to create big plays. And Kenneth Walker is as creative a runner as there is in the NFL, maybe this side of Saquon Barkley, right? So he is just a creative, Greg Cosell, when he came out, called him a jazz musician, right? He's trying to find the one, but when he finds the one, he's getting that alto sax out, man. And he is going over the top of it, man. He is going to find that pocket and he is going to solo over that pocket. And this offense provides him the ability to have that pocket. I think it's a significantly better fit as an offense than it is for Zach Charbonnet. It is just the matter. It is just the matter of him staying on the field. I'll take the risk with Kenneth Walker at ADP.
All day long. Couldn't agree more. Ryan Grubb was not competent enough to use the weapons at his disposal. Clint Kubiak will be. And actually, if the Seahawks are in a bit of a jam this season and they get a bit of buyer's remorse with Sam Darnold, and that's not outside the realms of possibility, I think it could be really exciting to see a Jalen Milroe mixed in with a Ken Walker here at sort of the back end of the season. I think that could really accelerate things down the stretch as well. There's also some favorable parts of Ken Walker's schedule later on as well. So I think there's a lot of value in Ken Walker. I've been snapping him up in a lot of places. And I've got Alvin Kamara because he's got the easiest schedule. He's got absolutely no competition. I don't care if DeJohn Veely is a future Hall of Famer. He is not taking targets away from Alvin Kamara in that area of the field. And I just think at the end of the day, who else is there in New Orleans? Like, they have one star player on offense. You could argue Olave, but with those injury concerns, especially with concussions, there isn't anyone else. There isn't anyone else. The tight ends
Rashid Shaheed a lot, but yes.
Yeah, I do too. But he, again, very different area of the field to operate in. You look at where he is in his area of the field, there's no competition on that roster for him for targets. And, my favorite argument when everyone says, oh, you tip him too highly. One, he's always delivered. He never has not. And second of all, everyone's like, oh, he's not a 1,000-yard rusher. Don't need him to be, because combined, he'll get 1,400. If he does it 7-7, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me. So I just think Alvin Kamara is a value every year. He has gone up significantly. When we started doing these shows, he was like at pick 58. So he has gone up nearly 20 spots. So at the end of the day, he's getting to the point now where I still think he's a value at 39. I think if you, I wouldn't pay a second round price on him, but I'd pay a third round price on him easily. You're going to have to go up and get him a little bit. But I'd feel comfortable doing that. I think he's easily a top 12 running back this year.
I mean, I haven't drafted him a ton, and maybe that's the try to be a year too early than a year too late kind of guy for Kamara, but it's easy to make the argument for him, right? You're 100% right, and I think Kellen Moore will figure out a way to get the best out of him.
Yeah, he really will, and he doesn't have to do a lot. We're talking about a guy last year who averaged 19 fantasy points per game. And there's less competition on the roster now than there was 12 months ago.
Yeah. I'm not sure Kendrick Miller exists. I know that there's been some hype about him in preseason, and I'm like, is that AI generated? You never can tell these days. I mean, you can tell with like what art is AI generated, but I don't know about the videos. But yeah, I'm not sure Kendrick Miller exists. I think Diana Rossini had mentioned that the Saints are calling around on running backs to try to get some depth there. So, but I don't think that says anything about Kamara, who, by the way, they extended very recently.
Yeah, watch out, by the way. I'm willing to put a small amount of money on the fact that Leonard Fournette will get a phone call and that he will end up on the
I haven't heard that name in a while.
Well, that's what I mean, but I just think they're that desperate, and Leonard Fournette will play for not a lot of money now because his prospects in the NFL are completely gone. That I just feel like that, and he's got that affiliation with LSU, and I just see it. I just see him getting a phone call week 4 of the season where they've realized that Kendrick Miller's AI generated. And I just totally see it. So don't be too shocked if it happens. Wide receivers, I am genuinely surprised by your one because I can't get there even at ADP. So I'm keen to hear the argument about a team that I think are in real trouble this season.
I agree, by the way, with that. Don't tell our friend Lee, but I completely agree that the Dolphins are in trouble. And I have had a really difficult time, Murf, reconciling my love for Jalen Waddle at ADP with the fact that I have a 5-unit bet on the Dolphins going under their 8.5 win total. But the fact of the matter remains, they have the good defensive line, but the edge rushers are coming off of serious injuries. So you've got that. At least you have Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb coming off. Their secondary could be a disaster. I know they brought Minkah Fitzpatrick back, but they brought Minkah Fitzpatrick back in the same trade that traded Jalen Ramsey. So maybe a slight upgrade at best, and that's if you like the trade, which I actually liked it more from Pittsburgh's perspective. But Jalen Waddle, it has also the effect of what is going on with Tyreek Hill. What's going on with him? I'm really not 100% sure what's going on with Tyreek Hill's injury. The relationship with Tua is weird. So Tyreek Hill is somebody who I didn't love this year. Well, I didn't hate this year, but I've started to back off on him. And here's the thing. This is an offense that has scored points. I know they're a paper tiger, but this is an offense that has scored points all the time when Tua Tagovailoa plays. I have plenty of problems with Tua, but Jalen Waddle at wide receiver 33, that is just way too cheap for me. For all the things that might need to happen, this might be a team that needs to throw the ball a lot. I'm not sure if Tyreek Hill is fully bought in or fully healthy. Give me Jalen Waddle at wide receiver 33. I can't draft enough of him at that cost. I've actually gone and reached for him a couple of times, felt icky doing it, but I had to go get a player that I liked, and it was and Jalen Waddle was one of them.
Yeah, I buy into all of that, except for the fact that there's 2 things that I'm really concerned about. Well, 3, actually. So the first is I don't think Mike McDaniel makes it to the end of the season.
He might not. Yes,
and then if he does not, then all bets are off what happens with that offense. It could be really good for Jalen Waddle. It could be a complete disaster. 2, and I mean, he's at such a cost that it doesn't matter in a sense because you're not losing that much, which is fine. But when Tua, and unfortunately I'm going to use when because it's almost like baked in, he gets another concussion. It's Zach Wilson you're relying on, which he did not really make anybody fantasy relevant in New York. And he didn't make Garrett Wilson, barely made him fantasy relevant. And we're talking about a much better player there. And then my third point is last season when it came to Jalen Waddle, he scored 33% of his points in 2 games last season. He had 2 spike weeks. He had 2 other weeks where he finished above 10 PPR points and a lot of single values. And yes, a lot of that was the bad quarterback play. They're going to be in shootouts, but Hill also wasn't getting targeted all that much. If Hill comes back, I'm just a bit concerned about what happens in that offense. And I think other than Devon Achane, there is points actually where I think Tyreek Hill is a value because you get him in the 4th round. And I think you've almost got to take him because of what he could be.
Yeah.
But I think Waddle for me is one I'm struggling with. I've got a player who I just seem to be drafting in every draft at the moment. This is Xavier Worthy, wide receiver 25, 55 overall. And with the Rashee Rice situation, looking by the day, we're looking at a 6-game plus suspension because that's the trend. And I appreciate nothing is confirmed. And there's a scenario where Rashee Rice doesn't get a suspension. I think that's unlikely. But I still think at wide receiver 25, he has this significant upside to where if we're talking about a player last year who averaged 11 fantasy points per game. Towards the end of the season, really came into his own. Best points of the season, 15, 16, 17. In your fantasy playoffs, he helped you win a title as he kind of put some things together. It was kind of really ropey there in the middle, but it definitely got better at the end of the season. We definitely saw who he was while there was a bit of that competition. I just think Xavier Worthy is one of these players now where the outcomes can point to him being a potential league winner at wide receiver 25. And I look at the other players in that range and think, they're fine. They're good players at that range, and there's some value and some cost. But there isn't that potential top 12, top 15 upside in many of those players. And I look at Worthy and I think if Rice gets suspended 6 games or more, he could go to the moon. And I just think, and I think if he doesn't, I think he finishes around that cost. So I think you're buying a player whose floor is about where you're buying it, maybe 1 or 2 spots under, but nothing really to worry about. But the ceiling is there, and I think I just look at that and think there's a place there.
The thing about Worthy is like there are some kind of mixed up metrics for him. One of the things that Brett Whitefield didn't love about Xavier Worthy coming out was he was this super fast wide receiver, but he wasn't a great deep ball tracker. And that's a concern for somebody who's that fast. But that being said, I also saw what he did at the end of last season as a positive. In his final 10 games, including the postseason, which also includes the Super Bowl against the Eagles, where I think he scored too late. Like literally, I was too busy celebrating by the end of that game. But he scored 2 touchdowns against backups in the Super Bowl. At least one of them was against backups, and one of them was that deep ball throw from Mahomes to Worthy, which is sparking a lot. But including the postseason, over his final 10 games, he was putting up basically wide receiver 9-ish numbers in half PPR fantasy points per game. And here is the one thing that I like about Worthy, outside of the Rashee Rice suspension. We are looking at an offense where I think finally Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes know what they have been doing is not necessarily sustainable. I don't know how they've managed to massage that team into the Super Bowl the last couple of years with a dink and dunk offense, but I think the problem for the Chiefs in that Super Bowl was their offense didn't belong on the field. The Eagles, there was no big play threat whatsoever. They couldn't run the football, and I just don't know if they're going to play like that again. So I think they really are counting on Xavier Worthy to take a big step forward. They need him to take a big step forward so they can play more of like they did 3, 4, 5 years ago as opposed to the way they played the last 2.
Yeah. The other thing about Worthy, which isn't mentioned, is he got 3 rushing touchdowns last year, and he had that bit of that hybrid Deebo Samuel roll down the stretch where he's getting 3 or 4 carries on the ground per game, which I don't think is going away.
They do all that stuff. Yeah, they do all that stuff.
And you know, I sit there and think it's an extra cheat code in that range. You can write in pen that he's going to get 3 carries a game, which he might do nothing with. There's still 3 touches of the football that something could happen. And he got over 100 rushing yards last year. He averaged 5 yards a rush last year, which, is not nothing. Yeah. So again, another reason I just think Xavier Worthy is a good value at where he is. Tight ends, you're going to talk about one of my absolute favorite players at ADP, and I'm glad you picked him. I've gone in a different direction.
Yeah, so George Kittle, this is just a pivot off of the elite tight end kind of strategy. And I guess we'll talk about my fade at tight end, which I freaking hate that it's a fade, but it is just because of the cost. George Kittle, last year at one point, I remember saying to myself, I think I'm out of the George Kittle business. And I was planning on that to being in perpetuity. And sometimes you just have to admit when you're wrong. And now all of a sudden, in a strange twist of events, the only healthy 49ers heading into the season are Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle. The two guys who you've had to worry about most of the time are the two guys who are healthy going into the season.
George Kittle. And Sky Moore.
Oh yeah, Sky Moore. Good Lord. George Kittle is going to lead this team in receiving this year if he's healthy.
Oh,
and you can like Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings, and I like those guys. I don't know what's going on with Jennings. It might be more of an my calf hurts until you pay me more money deal. And I don't blame him for that after what happened to Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk got his money, and then Juwan Jennings was the one who actually produced. But no, George Kittle's going to lead this team in receiving if he's healthy. And that is and you don't have to pay Bowers McBride prices for him round and a half. Sometimes if you get the right draft board, 2 rounds later than those guys. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. If they were next to each other on the board, McBride and Kittle, whose button you pushing?
McBride.
After everything you've just said, you're still going to push the McBride.
Well, yeah,
button.
because I think McBride's I think he's just a better option in terms of PPR and weekly reliability. And McBride also doesn't have the injury history that George Kittle has. But the good news is they're not right next to each other on the board. So, so there's your good news, Murf. So, no, look, I mean, and if Brock Bowers and George Kittle were right next to each other, I'm drafting Brock Bowers 10 times out of 10. But Brock Bowers ain't right next to George Kittle. He's going like 30 picks ahead of him.
No, that's fair. I just I had to ask the question because we'll get into the other option in a bit. I'm going with David Njoku. I just think at tight end 9 in that bargain bucket, I'm one of these people that doesn't like to pay up for the elite tight end. I just don't like how the build comes out. I get the Bowers. I can't get there on McBride. I get it with Kittle a lot more. He's someone who I'm definitely, especially in all these contests, charity leagues with the custom scoring, and Kittle's ADP doesn't move. I'm just like, he's a cheat code where he is, and his ADP doesn't move in those tournaments. He's an auto slam pick at where he is. So I get a lot of him there. But David Njoku, with the history that we have, and it's a very small sample size, we know Joe Flacco's the starter. Anyone who thought that was going to be any other outcome is mad. And, you know, it's a strange one to me because everyone's sitting here going like, oh, Shedeur Sanders, he's played well in the preseason. Like, Shedeur Sanders is going to get games. And, you know, Dylan Gabriel's going to get games. They've drafted these guys. We're going to have to see where they've turned out. And you're just like, no, they really could just cut these guys next year. They've got no significant investment in them. I'm still convinced that Shedeur Sanders was a Jimmy Haslam pick that Kevin Stefanski did to keep his job. Like, I genuinely, the lack of excitement, like they'd watch Schindler's List and they're clapping like this when they draft him, tells me that was a guy that absolutely nobody in that draft room wanted. So there's no investment in him. There is no investment in Dylan Gabriel. They are just at this point where they'll ride out Flacco because he gives them the best chance. If they don't and they pivot, they will pivot to Kenny Pickett. And then after that, they're taking a quarterback next year. They've got 2 first-round picks. So you have to go into the fact that Flacco is going to be the guy. Flacco is going to go to the guys on the roster he knows. He was on that roster a couple of years ago. Who's a guy who knew David Njoku. You're not going to get elite performance from tight end 8, tight end 9, tight end 10, tight end 11. So who is the guy who has a chance to get up there? It's David Njoku. We look at what he did. He was a league winner for people a couple of years ago with that relationship. Buy on that. And you know what? If you miss at the price that you're buying him, you can draft a Jake Ferguson who's just been paid later on and go and take 2 guys. Or you can just pick one off the waiver wire because at that point the position doesn't matter.
Yeah, you could just like Hunter Henry's one of the guys I like. Hunter Henry might not get drafted in your home league, and like he should be, but he might not get drafted.
No, and there's so many guys in that range. Cade Otton's another one. He's not going to get drafted. Sanders out of Carolina, he's not going to get drafted. There's so many guys that you can. Mason Taylor's not going to get drafted. So many guys you can get who could end up. Even Chigga is not going to get drafted. All these guys offer you something on the waiver wire if it's a bust. But I think the upside for what you get, you got to look into it. I'm going to ask you now to sort of blast through all of your least favorite picks at ADP with an explanation.
Yeah, we're just we're going rapid fire now because we were flapping our gums too much. Or having what do you guys say? Taking the piss? What does that? What does that mean?
Taking the mic or taking the Mickey, which means we just we're basically loose the truth, having a joke, having a laugh, just
having a chin wag
away, having a chin wag.
Yeah, that's that was actually in my crossword puzzle. Oh, and I also got a Jeopardy clue right by something I learned in London. I learned what a sleeping policeman was, so I was able to get a Jeopardy clue right because anyway. Here are the guys that I do not like at ADP. I said I was out of the George Kittle business, and then I had to get pulled back in. Well, now I'll have another player I'm out of the business on. I am out of the Kyler Murray business. I am sick and tired of this guy. QB9 is too expensive for me. I don't think he's improved since his rookie season. And here's the problem with Kyler Murray. His rushing production isn't as good as you think. He has just some random spike weeks, but he doesn't run for nearly as many yards as Lamar Jackson, and he doesn't score nearly as many touchdowns as Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen. So he kind of straddles the mobile quarterback thing by getting all the empty calories and none of the rich stuff. So Lamar doesn't score a ton of rushing touchdowns, but he runs for a ton of yards. Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts don't run for as many yards as Lamar Jackson, but they score a ton of touchdowns. Kyler does neither, and he's so inconsistent. At quarterback 9, I'm just waiting a few rounds. At running back, Breece Hall, RB14, 31 overall. I'm kind of buying the Aaron Glenn hyping up Braylon Allen. Breece Hall, on film, our guys thought he looked a step slower last year. He's a really difficult player for me to rank, but I just like other players at his price a lot more. I don't think I've drafted Terry McLaurin once this offseason, Murph. I really don't. And look, he's still not in camp. His touchdown rate was exorbitant last year. I know his quarterback play was much better, but he is now getting drafted as wide receiver 16. There are names I much prefer to Terry McLaurin. He's too expensive for me. And then Brock Bowers at 16th overall. That is just a tough price for me to pay. I hate that I am fading Brock Bowers. I hate it. I hate that I don't have any Brock Bowers, but I don't. And I know certain weeks of the season, that's going to make me feel really bad that I don't have a ton of Brock Bowers. It really is, but the price is just too high right now.
Yeah, I'm there with you. He's actually going in the first round in most drafts I'm in right now, and I can't get there. I hate the build. I'm completely with you. Terry McLaurin, I don't mind it at wide receiver 16. I get what you're saying. There's a lot of risk in there, but there's also a lot of upside in there. You have to ride the lightning. I have done in a couple of drafts. I just think we know how good he is, and I want pieces of that offense. But then that also leads me to buy Deebo Samuel a lot because they do have a better alternative this year. Yeah, and I'm with you on Breece Hall. I struggle to get there. I think, the Braylon Allen hype mixed in with that health injury, mixed in with Justin Fields there, it's just going to take away so much work. I can't get there. And Kyler is an interesting one. I think this is a really pivotal year for Kyler Murray. I think if he doesn't do it this year, the franchise are going to move on. And so I think he almost has to treat this as a contract year, that he has to go out there. I don't love the offensive coordinator. I don't love the scheming for him, but I do think there's room for improvement there. And he has a weapon there that I think will help him out significantly. Let's talk about mine. Patrick Mahomes, I get what you're saying on the offense, but he has not put up the fantasy numbers now for 3 or 4 years. And I know there's an elite player in there. You have to take the elite player out and you have to look at what the body of work is in fantasy football. And it's just not QB6, and it hasn't returned QB6 for a while. Can he get there? Yes. I don't really want to buy players at their ceiling, and I feel like QB6 is the Patrick Mahomes ceiling. I don't see him getting above Allen, Jackson, Daniels, and Hurts. So they're the top 4. And then it's like, to finish 6, he's got to beat one of Burrow and Mayfield. I don't see that. And then I think on top of that, then you've got the other guys, the Mays, the Nixes, who have a pathway to get there. I just can't get there on Mahomes. It's not a slight on him. I don't like buying players at their ceiling. Josh Jacobs is another one. RB8, based on his ceiling. We got a player that actually sort of got to where he finished last year almost by default. He's a player who really sort of ran out of steam end of the season. He was very good at the start of the season. And people, I think, forget, well, kind of the middle of the season. It took a while to get going. And then when he got going, he can put up really, really good numbers, good, consistent numbers. And then it just fell off for him. And I look at what he did, down the stretch, week 17, 11 points, week 11, 8, 11 points, after putting up a nice round bunch of 20s after the bye week. But he is getting older. He is a player who I think in an offense that they will stop the run. They know what they're doing with the Packers this year. Then you've got the pressure of getting Golden involved. I don't think they're going to run the ball as much. I also don't think they're going to be ahead as much in games. They've got a tough schedule. I just can't get there on Jacobs.
Yeah, it's just the Marshawn Lloyd injury is making me really rethink that at this point. Marshawn Lloyd can't stay on the field. He's like Kendrick Miller. He might be AI generated at this point.
Yeah, that is true. And they don't have much option behind, so that might play in his favor. T. Higgins, again, it's nothing on T. Higgins, but you're buying the player his ceiling. Can I see a world that T. Higgins finishes higher than wide receiver 12? No. I just don't. That world is only happening if Jamar Chase gets injured. That's it. That's the only outcome.
The only thing I would push back on that, Murf, is what if Joe Burrow breaks the NFL record in pass attempts, which I think is within the realm of outcomes this year.
But I think he'd have to just to give this a chance to support.
He is getting drafted highly, yes.
I just think, again, you're buying a player his ceiling. If we have wide receiver 17, wide receiver 18, I'm in. It's nothing on the player. I just don't see a world that he outperforms 12. So I just can't get there. And Trey McBride at tight end 2, I just think with Marvin Harrison Jr., you got a guy who didn't get in the end zone last year. So yes, there is a pathway to those points increasing, but you've got a player in Marvin Harrison Jr. who's going to command the ball a heck of a lot more than he did last season. He's your generational talent. He's your field stretcher. And people are saying, like, well, the offense hasn't really changed. So where the target's going to go? Well, they're going to go from McBride and they're going to go to Marvin Harrison Jr. because there needs to be a change. That offense was pretty stagnant last year. It just went, again, that dink-dunk football. They didn't win many football games. They were competitive, but you don't win anything for being competitive in this league. If you want to be a star offense and you want to win football games, you have to get the ball to your best players. And I'm not saying Trey McBride's a bad player at all, but I don't see a world that he gets the volume he got last year. And so to offset that, he's going to need a lot of touchdowns. And I just don't buy into the fact that the Cardinals are going to score at a ridiculous rate this year. So I just can't get there on McBride. Give me at cost. If I had the choice between Trey McBride and George Kittle and they were next to each other, I would take George Kittle.
That's wow. That's wild. Yeah.
Because I just think the pathway is there for Kittle. I can't see the pathway being there for McBride. I think everything leads to a regression year. I think he gets less targets. I think he gets less catches. He might go up in touchdowns. He's going to need to go up 5 touchdowns to offset what he loses in his volume.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I like McBride and can't stand Kyler Murray is a little bit of cognitive dissonance for me, right?
A little bit. But I also think the supporting cast will be better. I really like Michael Wilson. I think there's a good player in there. I think he'll command some touches as well as we go along. Let's wrap this up quickly then by looking at some of the players that we expect to outperform ADP and mixing those into some of our favorite under the radar players. Who have you got here that people should be looking at when they're considering their drafts?
Yeah, I mentioned him a little bit earlier. Jordan Love, I think the Packers want to throw the ball a little bit more this year if he's healthy. I know he has the thumb injury, but it's on his non-throwing hand, so I'm not terribly worried about that. I say on our SiriusXM morning show that, sometimes you count sheep when you want to fall asleep. I count Tony Pollard's because he's the most boring pick in fantasy, but he's getting drafted as an RB3. He had a great year last year, and Tyjae Spears is hurt. that offense should be better this year with Cam Ward. So Tony Pollard is a running back who fits a ton of builds, whether, you wait really deep for your first running back or you go hero RB and wait for your second running back. I think he fits a lot of builds. We talked about Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver 46, his ADP. That's not really his ADP, but that's what it's going to be. And Hunter Henry, tight end 19. I mentioned that he's not even getting drafted in some home leagues. He's getting drafted as a back end tight end too. I just don't see that. He had a great connection with Drake May last year.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I love all those picks. I'm in on all of them. I agree with you that Tony Pollard he's so boring, but I absolutely love it because I just think he's got a great pathway there all over the shop. So I'm completely in on all of those. I've got a few here. Alvin Kamara I've already mentioned. Kyron Williams, by the way, is RB11, right? And we're talking about a guy who, first of all, has just been paid. So the organization value him. He got a good contract as a running back. 2, he had the worst schedule of all. Shout out to Scott Barrett, by the way, because this is his research. Strength of schedule last year. He had the worst running back schedule last year. And yet he was still a top 5 running back. He had the highest snap share of any running back last year, a boatload of carries. And I get the argument, hey, when a player has a boatload of carries the following year, it doesn't tend to transpire very well. I get all of that, and that makes sense. But also, 1, that's a trend. It's got to stop at some point. And 2, there isn't anyone that's come along to really threaten him. Like, Corum is basically the same. Like, they took him because he is Kyron Williams 2.0. So he's only there for when Kyron Williams goes down. And Jarquez Hunter is a guy. Like, he's going to get a little bit of work, but he's not exciting. He's not going to move the dial. It's just going to be Kyron Williams running the football, doing what he does. And if he stays healthy, and there's nothing to suggest he won't, he's going to get the same volume, if not more. And he's got an easier schedule this year. Like, I just think at running back 11, and I get the argument. If you don't want to touch him because guys that get that much work tend to get injured the next year.
But they signed him.
But they signed him and paid him. Like, I just think they're telling you, the front office is telling you, this is our guy.
Yeah, I mean look, people are really dig in on their priors with Kyron Williams because they didn't like him because he wasn't an athletic prospect. Everything that they have done, with the exception of the fact that Sean McVay, for some reason, needs to. It's like getting underwear for Christmas. Sean McVay needs to draft a running back every year. Yeah. It's still, you still have your favorite pair of underwear, right? Those are the ones that let you breathe a little bit more. That's Kyron Williams. That is Sean McVay's favorite pair of boxer shorts. And even though he gets new ones every year, he refuses to throw out the one that has a hole in the right place that just lets the air ventilate a little bit. Well, Murf, you said it's a little warm there. It's a little warm there over. I get it.
All day long.
You know how it gets sometimes.
All day long. It's your insurance pair. It's your pair that you bring on when you absolutely need it, but you don't want to wear it. So I'm with you. Kenneth Walker, I've got in there. Cortland Sutton, by the way, is wide receiver 22. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get how we've got to this point of the offseason and Cortland Sutton is the wide receiver 22 on a very good Sean Payton offense, where, again, there is very little competition for targets of a player that they paid a boatload of money to. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense. Like, he's a top 15 player that you're getting at 22. You're getting him below his floor.
Yeah.
Like, I just see, I really like to diversify my teams. Like, I really hate drafting the same players all the time. But it's Cortland Sutton there. I'm just like, I just press the button because I can't. I just can't get away from it. I'm just like, no, I've got to do it. Because I look at the other players in that round that he's going in. I'm like, I don't want any of them. He's a tier raiser.
Yeah.
So I just love him there. Jerry Judy's the same. Wide receiver 33. Like,
the only thing about Judy is, like, Flacco is, I know you alluded to it earlier, Flacco isn't going to play all year. But I guess if he does, Judy's going to catch 100 passes. So, like, you have to balance that out. Wide receiver 33, yeah.
He almost doesn't have to play all year. He only has to play to get you in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, you only need Jerry Judy for like 8 to 10 weeks. Get him through your bye weeks, and then you can discard him at wide receiver 33 price. Like, it always doesn't matter. Like,
yeah,
why
winning in week 1 is the same as winning. Well, I mean, it matters the same as winning in week 14. I know it doesn't feel that way, but winning in week 1 it allows you to get into a position to make the playoffs.
Yeah. And then I've got Jake Ferguson because they just paid him a boatload of money. He's tied in 17. I look at the rest of the bargain bucket tiers and I think I'll follow the money. I'll take the guy they paid. Dallas, when he gets going, is a good offense. Dak's a good quarterback. Their struggles are tied to his injuries. I'll get there on Ferguson. When they've worked together, he's been a top 7, top 8 tight end most weeks when they've been together as a pair. So you're getting him at tight end 17. So yeah, I'll take that. Any sort of shout outs to some under the radar players or players that you think deserve a worthy mention, late sleepers, before we let you get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, should I insult your listeners who very clearly know who Bill Krosky Merritt is and actually bring him up as a late sleeper? Because that train has left the station, Murph. I'm actually going through right now and going to my players who I have the most exposure to. Eli Manor for the Titans is an interesting one because they have nothing at receiver behind Calvin Ridley. He is a player who I have quite a bit invested in. I've already mentioned Hunter Henry. I like Cedric Tillman with the Browns because Flacco is starting. I have him quite a bit. I have him on nearly half of my best ball teams. He was great in a small sample last year. Later in the season, I have dabbled a little bit in Joshua Palmer from the Bills. More than likely, that's just going to be a very annoying committee, but he can separate against man, which is something nobody else on that team can do. Bashal Tutin from the Jaguars, I'm still drafting him. I think there's a chance that in your home leagues, he's somebody might draft and then drop, but I think he's going to have some very, very noteworthy games later on in the season in that backfield.
Yeah, I like that. And with your Tennessee Titans shout out, I'll also put on Restrepo in there as well. I think he's another one. I think you can take a bullet on one or the other. I kind of lean more towards your way than Restrepo, but I think
Brett Whitefield, our guy Brett Whitefield had him as one of his 3 favorite receivers in the entire draft last year,
which is wild because he fell a long way. There's some reasons why he fell, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I genuinely think Sean Tucker is a guy that you can take in the last round of your drafts instead of taking a kicker. And don't be too shocked if Rachaad White is traded, cut, or just put on the shelf somewhere. Sean Tucker's explosive. I know preseason 2 didn't go too well, but he's a guy that we saw against the Saints last year when both running backs were down. He put up like 180 yards of offense. Like, he's explosive. He's a cool dude. He's well liked. Just don't be surprised if Sean Tucker's a guy who emerges as that number 2 backfield guy behind Bucky Irving. So he's a guy I'm really watching. I think Darren Waller is free. There's not a lot going on in Miami, so if I had to rush and take a guy on offense there, I'll take him. He's a free guy. You can stick him on your IR. If it doesn't pan out, you can cut him. He's cost you nothing at all there as well. And I've already mentioned Chigo Kwankwu, but I really like Diami Brown as well. I think give me any cheap parts of this Jags offense with what Liam Cohen did last year, because they could get to the point they need these guys. And so I would take any part of this Jags offense that's practically free. As you said, Tutin's there, Bakesby's there. But yeah, shout out Diami Brown. He's another player I would just sort of look at in that range and think, yep. And if you need Woody Marks is one, I think he could end up.
Oh, great one. Yeah.
Woody Marks away from Joe Mixon.
You couldn't pay me to draft Mixon right now, Murph.
Oh, mate, do you know what? I got him in a draft the other day in the 12th round. I smashed it.
Maybe, yeah. That's fine. That's fine, because if you have to drop him, then you just drop him.
Right? I got him in the 12th round. I was like, do you know what? I kind of have to. It was a super flex draft, so it kind of, you factor in 1 or 2 rounds. But still, at the 10th, I'd have done it. Like, I just think the range of outcomes to him succeeding is there. The pathway of, am I going to get another player who's got that range of outcome of being a ceiling raiser in that range? Probably not. So I'll take the spin. But yeah. And then Jalen Naylor, because he's going to get at least 3 games here to start the season. He did score touchdowns in 2 of the opening 3 games last season
He is hurt though.
He is hurt.
Yes.
So keep an eye on that one. But if all camp dependent how he is, if he's healthy, do keep an eye on that one. And the other one's Ollie Gordon, just because if something happens, I think he's the next guy up. I don't think
good one. Yeah. Like, the Naylor one's interesting because the Vikings are poking around for a wide receiver. As a matter of fact, I think every Viking fan on planet Earth wants them to trade for Adam Thielen, which would also help the Panthers situation. And kind of sort that out with McMillan, Liggett, and Jalen Coker. I don't know if you're a Coke head, Murf, but there's a lot of them over here in the southeastern United States.
Loads of them. Mm-hmm. I don't get why I'm not there. No, absolutely. But anyone else you want to mention, guys that maybe people shouldn't draft or anything, any other special mentions of players as we're giving people the draft plan here?
Yeah, it's just like I just have not been getting there on the elite quarterbacks this year. I just don't like the way my builds look. It's just one of those things that I just have not enjoyed. And that was different a couple years ago, but I think we've gotten back to quality depth at the position. If they fall, maybe I'll dabble. Jaden Daniels falls a round or two longer than I thought, or Hurts or Joe Burrow, but it's not really something that I've been dabbling in there, Murph, this year. And other than that, I mean, there haven't been a ton of players that I'm like, oh my God, I am absolutely 100% out on. But I told you, Terry McLaurin, that was probably my number one. Does that scare me? Yeah, but like, I didn't love what the Commanders did this offseason. I don't love that team in general. I know that's a controversial take, but the fact that they're the oldest team in the NFL scares me. I think they know it too, which is why they haven't paid McLaurin, who's 30. But if they don't have him, they don't have speed. The vibes are off there.
Yeah, that's fair. And the other players I'm a bit wary on. Tyrone Tracy, these guys that are going to likely lose their job. The exception to that rule is Travis Etienne, because I think he's going to hold it for most of the season. I think where you're drafting him, he's going to be relevant, especially in the Liam Cohen offense. You can get a lot of top low-end RB1, high-end RB2 weeks out of him before you have to put him on the shelf. And I think when you bake that cost in, it kind of works. But he might hold on the rest of the way because he's out of contract next year. They might just run the wheels off. Especially a rookie head coach, he's not going to be under that pressure to win straight away. But yeah, the other guys, the Tyrone Tracys, the Jalen Warrens, these guys, the Aaron Joneses of this world, where at some point that there's going to be a change. That because there is going to be a change, it's going to be sooner rather than later. I'm out on those guys. I just think in those situations, always take the cheaper running back. And wait, I think you can get there just fine on those players.
Oh, I mean, Murph, you've got some good takes there, my friend, and your Buccaneers have made things exciting for you. They're going to be a fun team to watch this year. The one I will push back on though is Calvin Ridley, because if he is healthy, I just don't see a way he doesn't lead that team overwhelmingly in targets. Even though I like Io Manor late, I mean, I just think if Cam, I have to consider, what if Cam Ward is good, right? Like that's a question you have to ask yourself,
my only worry about, and I didn't say him because I have sat on the fence on this for about 3 weeks, but I haven't drafted him because he just hasn't shown it for a few years now. He's had this, ever since he's come back after the gambling ban, he's not really been a thing in the NFL. Like, he's kind of not been relevant. And I just wonder, at what point can it ever come back? And this is his best chance. Is his best chance. If he doesn't do it this year, he might as well retire, because he's not going to ever get a better opportunity than with Cam Ward, who I think will be quite good this year. Will be raw, but I think he'll be okay. You're right, there's no competition. But I also think that no competition hurts him, because all you got to do is stick 2 guys on Calvin Ridley, and we saw this in Jacksonville. You put 2 guys on him, he can't break the coverage. And that's my other concern. He's cheap enough to where I get it, and I wouldn't advise people not to draft him. I just kind of don't see a world where I think he's threatening the fantasy relevant stakes that often, but it also wouldn't shock me if he did. Like, if he went and put up at 1,200 yards this season, I wouldn't sit there and go, I can't believe that. Like, I can see a world because the talent's there, but I'm lean more towards that. I don't think he will than he would, but I don't strongly feel about that strong enough to sort of plant a flag and say, no way ever. But I just can't get there on him personally. But
he's a guy I've gotten. So he and Waddle are two guys I've definitely gotten there on that you haven't, which is interesting.
Yeah, I would take Ridley over Waddle. Like I am really applying.
Okay, all right.
I couldn't take Waddle anywhere. I can't get there. But on Ridley, I kind of like I could get there eventually, but I'm not there yet. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. This has been phenomenal as always. Tell everyone where they can find you and also
Murf,
where they can buy their Fantasy Point subscriptions, and if you have any codes where they can take
for sure
offers and things like that, because you've got to buy Fantasy Points. It is the elite subscription service out there when it comes to data. It's what I use. The articles from Scott Barrett, from everybody in the team there, and the guy who heads up the customer service is elite, by the
way. Sometimes that makes me feel like jumping out a window, though, Murph. No, use code SCORE10 at Fantasy Points. We're there for every type of league. Look, I feel like you'll get your money's worth if you 100%. Drop that code for 10% off, and you come in, download a couple cheat sheets, read a couple articles. For whatever kind of league you have. Scott Barrett has his more philosophical piece. He and Ryan Heath. John Hansen, he's got more of just the feel of the draft type piece. I have our auction draft plan. You print out a couple of cheat sheets, I guarantee you're going to get your money's worth. But that also gets you in-season stuff, waiver wire help, trades. That's all for just at our base package. If you play DFS and you do a little gambling, we have a package for that as well. And then you can go all in with our data package, which is really for serious researchers. But nonetheless, if you want to dabble in that, we got that, and that code will work for everything.
It really is. And I'll say this because I shout it out every year whenever I've done the matchup show and I look at the wide receiver cornerbacks matchups. I exclusively use Fantasy Points data for that because it is simply the best in the business. So honestly, you will not regret buying a subscription to Fantasy Points. If you want to get better, I buy it every year. I know many people in our Patreon buy it every year. So do get and buy Fantasy Points this year. I promise you won't be disappointed if you are serious about winning leagues. But Joe, thank you so much for coming on. I can tell you that seeing you in person, having dinner with you, with your lovely wife a few weeks ago was definitely the highlight of my summer, as well as seeing Oasis. I'll call it a tie. I hope you're
well, I appreciate that, Murph. The feeling is mutual. Thank you for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Rush Nation will be back next week for another bit of the master plan, the draft plan. I will be bringing on an amazing guest where we will be talking more about some of the strategic elements to tie into some of the great stuff we put out today. And then before you know it, it'll be draft season. We'll be in the week of the fantasy football season, and we'll be ready to go. Waiver wire week 0 will be out before you know it, and we'll be going forward. So thank you so much to Joe for coming on. Please stay tuned. Please like, subscribe. Do everything you can to support this channel. We're an independent network, so do everything you can. And also give the guys on the NFL show a bit of love. Episode 2 dropped this week with Joel and Pete, so make sure you give that some love. But until then, Rush Nation, enjoy your weekends. And don't forget, as always, keep rushing.